Hello everybody and welcome to the Headphone Guy review of Elite Dangerous. This is currently beta and it's currently version 3.03 that I'll be reviewing. As you can see, I haven't played it at all, not even a smidge. I have, however, played through the tutorial missions that teach you the basic controls of the game. Having said that, as you'll see in a minute, I still managed to get it quite severely wrong. Basically, Elite Dangerous is the newest version of the Elite franchise. Some of you may remember from way back when. It's one of the direct competitors to sort of Star Citizen, which is another game that a lot of you might have heard of. And as you can see, it's very pretty. You start the game in Asban Orbital Station, and I'm just going to have a look now at what the services that are offered by the station, just to give you a bit of an overview. So you can see that there's a news board, there's also a ship analysis that tells you how much hull integrity you have, how much fuel you have, and what ship you're currently flying, and whether or not you could repair and refuel it. Now the bulletin board's actually quite an interesting one. It's like a job board. You can actually collect missions to do. So I'm going to have a look through some of these. A lot of the bulletin board missions do require you to have some cargo hold space. And as I am now currently in the starting ship, unfortunately I don't have very much cargo space at all. So I'm looking for something that doesn't require much at all. And as you can see, this one says no hold space required. To go to Dahan Gateway seems quite easy. It's literally just a simple deliver mission. So not really knowing what I'm doing at this point, I've just simply collected it to see what happens. Having a look through some of the other options. And at this point I decide that it's time to get out there into the galaxy. Now, the very first time you ever go out into space in Elite Dangerous, it will run through with you a pre-flight checklist, which is about to appear on the screen. And as you can see, it's just getting me to make sure that I know the basic controls, which I then go ahead and promptly forget. It does seem as though that there is a bug in this version of the game. Whilst I was testing my throttle controls, it does seem to have remembered that the last thing I did was throttle down. And if you throttle down enough, you end up in reverse. You'll see what happens in a minute. As you can see now, it says no throttle at all, but wait for it.
Ship released. Engines engaged.
Whoops. So not exactly the best start in my space flying career.
Landing gear retracted.
So I thought what I'd do to begin with is to give you a bit of a sense of how it all looks. So I'd zoom away a bit from the space station, get to a point a fair distance away, and then just turn around and look back. As you can see, the planetary body is fairly nicely textured. That's actually been added in a fairly recent patch. And there is the station. And you can see even like kind of my plasma vapor trail or something. So this is me checking out my mission, just making sure I know what I'm doing, where I'm going. You actually have two computers on either side of your spaceship. This one seems to be more like navigation and communication, and the one on the other side of the ship is responsible for ship maintenance stuff. This is the galaxy map, which you'll see a bit better later on in the video. But this is just me trying to figure out actually where it is that I'm meant to be going, having picked up the mission and not even looked first, which was perhaps a little foolish. Right. At this point, I actually went to jump away from the station. However, it stopped me because of the nearby mass.
Charging.
So basically, the closer you are to a mass object, the longer it takes to charge up your warp engines.
2,
With
1, engage.
there being a point that if you're actually so close to the mass object, it won't actually, especially a large one, it won't actually let you go to warp until you fly a little bit further away from it. Now, when you're in warp, you can see my speed around the mini-map on the bottom right-hand corner, on the right-hand side, slowly increasing. I'm just going to check now. See if I can set it as an objective. Now, for a while I couldn't figure out how to actually select the planetary body, but you actually use it as though it was a 2D map, so you select it like that. At this point I'm flying at 300 and 400 kilometers a second in some random direction. To the left of the mini-map, in the top left-hand corner, you'll see that there's sort of like a targeting reticule, and that actually helps you point your ship in the right direction. Now, what's actually happened here is actually I've been interdicted, and what that is that I didn't know it at the time, but another player has actually seen me in warp and decided to attempt to knock me out of warp, to try and steal my goods or whatever. Whether or not, at this point I don't actually know anything about this, so I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just saw something that said escape vector and basically flew straight at it. In hindsight, that was a good thing to do. As you'll see later, what happens when you don't escape. So at this point I'm now heading towards the Dahan station. You can see my speed slowly building up on the right hand side. It builds up very, very gradually, and it also slows down very gradually. So the downside to that is that you can get to a point where you're flying very, very, very quickly towards something.
Drive charging.
And then you realise that you're going to overshoot it by quite a long way. Because this is actually a different system, I'm actually having to charge up another form of sort of warp technology, which actually is the system warp rather than the inter-system. This is the inter-system warp as opposed to the in-system warp, I should say. Now, you don't have any control whatsoever when you're doing this kind of warp. This is basically a glorified cutscene, and it just plonks you back in the system which you were aiming towards. So you can see now I'm in the Dahan system, and I'm going to have a quick look at where I'm meant to be going, and it says the spaceport is the Dahan Gateway, so I'll select that as my destination. And again, using the targeting reticule to the top left of the mini-map, I can figure out which direction it is around me. It shows a full blue circle if it's in front of you and in that circle of vision, and it's a hollowed out blue circle if it's behind you, so you know that you're facing basically the wrong way. Now, again, this is what I was saying about it takes a while to build up speed, but when you build up speed, it does. You'll see the amount of distance, so that's light seconds or light years, and underneath it tells you how long it is until you actually get to that destination at your current speed. So that's not 20 seconds, that's actually 20 minutes, but because I'm still increasing in speed, it's going down. So as not to overshoot, obviously I'm going to try and slow down as much as I can. And inevitably I'll probably overshoot anyway. As you can see, it's warning you to slow down. You actually jump into the system when you get a safe exit prompt above the minimap. Where it said slow down, it'll tell you that it's safe to exit, and you can just exit hyperspace or warp by pressing J. As you can see constantly in the top right hand corner, I'm constantly seeing new contacts and losing contacts. So even whilst I'm in warp, if I'm close enough to a friendly or an enemy player, I can see them, and I can scan them as well. And that's how you go about disrupting someone from warp. However, this being the basic craft, obviously I don't have any of those features yet. In fact, there is another player just streaming off to my right. And you can see it says safe disengage ready, so at that point you can disengage. Again, effectively you have a small loading screen while it loads up the system that you're jumping into, or the star, or the planet, or the station. Now I have to say I was presented with one of these stations in the tutorial, and it tells you to dock with the station, which you have to request like that.
Request granted.
And as you can see, there is a timeout on the request. I've got 9 minutes to land on landing pad 29. However, I don't know what shape it is. Is it an octahedron or whatever? And it spins slowly as well. However, whichever way I ended up seeming to approach it in the tutorial, I could not find the side of it that had the entrance. It took me about 15 minutes to actually find the entrance, which was somewhat frustrating. But this time I was quite lucky. I spotted it straight away. And actually, having seen what it looked like the first time round, finding it a second time round I think is much easier. Did cut it a little close with the some of the barriers. It's also worth noting that if you do try to dock with a station before asking for permission to land, they will A, fine you, and B, start shooting at you unless you leave very, very rapidly. Landing is always interesting. There is an auto lander which you can use. It's a module that you can buy for your starship or spaceship. Obviously, this again being the basic craft, it doesn't have it yet.
Warning, landing gear not deployed. Landing gear deployed.
Now, I don't honestly know what happened there. I think that was a small bug with the game. I had a bit of a paddy about my landing gear not being deployed. As you can see at the bottom, there's a sort of targeting area, and it's all about just lowering yourself down onto the landing pad in the correct spot without having too much velocity, and making sure your landing gear is down. So as you can see now, very briefly on that screen, you can see that I had used some fuel. I got 649 credits, which unfortunately in the grand scheme of things is not a lot. So it's worth having a look at the economy. And so this system sells hydrogen fuel quite cheap, and the reason why is because it's a high supply of it, which means they're swimming in it. So if I could find somewhere that wanted hydrogen fuel and bought it for a higher value than 101 credits each, then I could make a small profit. Unfortunately, because my ship's only got, I think, 4 tons of cargo hold space, I can only actually buy 4 of them, which is not exactly going to turn a huge profit. So I decided to go and see if I could find anything a little bit more interesting. So you can actually buy maps. So you don't actually know what systems have inside them until you explore them yourself. But if you go to a system and you go to Universal Cartographics, you can buy maps that players have already done the scouting for you. Now, you might have noticed I pressed launch, and I was a bit confused because it looked as though I was going into the hangar. But actually, what they're very, very kindly doing is putting me into the hangar, turning me about face so that I'm facing the right way, and then letting me go again.
Ship released. Engines engaged. Landing gear retracted.
And as you can see, there's a player in the exit there, so I immediately brake, trying to make sure that I don't actually hit him. But this is where a slight interesting quirk in the game occurs. I don't know what he was trying to do. He was acting very suspiciously. So I backed up, and I thought, you know what, I'll just make a break for it. And what actually happens is, as you can see, I've got a leave station countdown at the bottom, 4 minutes. As soon as I go into that blue force field, I've effectively left the station. And as I said before, you're not allowed back into the station unless you ask for permission. At that exact moment in time, he decides to come in, we collide, I've left, and I've come back in. So, I have just been warned. Unauthorized access, infraction detected, clear starport immediately to avoid lethal response. So I get the hell out of there. Unfortunately, they fine me 400 credits for trespassing, which is understandable. On that notice board mission, the bulletin board mission, I only earned about 600 credits. So all in all, I've only earned about 200 credits now. So I decided there's obviously got to be something a bit more profitable around here somewhere, and decide to carry on looking. So I have a look in the navigation system. What else is around? And I see that there is a conflict zone which says high intensity. So, having not experienced any combat yet, why not?
Ready to engage. 4, 3, 2, 1. Engage.
So, just to go over some of the other things in the UI, above the minimap to the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a sort of red icon that looks like 3 flames, and that is exactly that. It's your heat output. So that helps with you can actually overheat your systems, and you will take damage over time, as I missed the conflict zone quite astronomically. So you can overheat, but also you can also rig for silent running, which reduces your visibility to automated scanners. But unfortunately, silent running stops you from venting any gases and exhaust fumes. Now, what that means is that your heat will go up through the roof. So you've got to manage your heat whilst also trying not to get shot. As you can see, yet again, I've managed to overshoot for a second time, and worse than that, I actually managed to drop out of warp as well. No way near the zone that I was actually intending to go to. I hope that it's worthwhile getting when I get there. And again. Although, having said that, when you join warp, it does immediately throttle you up, and it's not particularly surprising I missed that, so... And we can go straight back in now, so... On the right-hand side of the screen, at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you can see how much fuel you're using per hour, and a bar underneath that shows you how much fuel you have left. Also, indicators to say whether you're currently mass locked, which is whether or not you can go to warp or not, whether your landing gear is down or not, and whether your cargo scoop is down or not. To the left of that, you have, I believe, these are energy reading meters. So it's how much energy you're allocating to weapons, to engineering, and to systems. And you can move those around dependent on your requirements. To the left of that, you've got your ship representation with shields and a model of your ship. And underneath that, you've got a bar saying how much percentage is left of your hull. Obviously, I'm now at the conflict zone, and it's supposedly high intensity. And all I can say is at the moment there's nothing here, so I immediately start looking for other things. Obviously, at that point, I notice I've been fined. Not thrilled. So I start looking for other things. So this is the other navigational computer. So this is ship status, modules that are attached to your ship, their type, their power requirements, and their priority at having those power requirements, cargo bay, and functions that you can do. So yes, for example, there does seem to be a faction choice option, which I chose none. And at some point you'll see why that might have been key. All of a sudden, I went into silent running mode. Now, silent running mode is fine, but actually, the moment I disabled silent running mode, it also disables my shields. The moment I disabled my shields, all hell broke loose. All of a sudden, there's numerous contacts all over my mini-map. There are people flying around all over the place. There's gunfire going off left, right, and centre.
Shields online.
All in all hell breaks loose. Now, what I'm doing is targeting these enemies, and in the bottom left-hand corner you can see what type of ship it is, the distance away from it is, and also their various ratings. So, the problem is, what I was looking for an enemy who had a wanted level. Because as far as I'm aware, you can attack people who have got a wanted level, like pirates, without getting into trouble with the law. Now, I looked and I looked and I looked, and none of these guys seem to have any kind of wanted level. So, going back to the option you saw earlier, when in choose faction, I believe that this was actually a faction war, and what's going on here is actually that the two rival factions are fighting. And because that they're, rival factions, they're not doing anything against the law by shooting at each other. So I decided to go and have a bit of a look, keep up with them. And then when it's kind of made clear that one side's winning, maybe I'll join in. So there's lots of different types of weaponry in the game as well. I've got pulse lasers currently equipped, and if you can see my targeting reticle, I don't know if you can tell, but actually as I turn, it's actually 2 dots in the middle rather than just a single dot, and that's the left laser and the right laser independently. And they don't have any delay when they fire, so you actually have to aim directly at the target. You don't have to lead in front of the target like you do with some projectile rifles and Gatling cannons. So at this point I decided to join in, foolishly or not. It does also say the rating of the person as the second thing down, and you'll notice that this guy says he's got a clean record, he's EGW, and that he's dangerous. Quite frankly, the only reason why I started shooting at him was because his side seemed to be losing, and I thought that he's probably too busy with the others to worry about me. It was when he sort of came about face and then started shooting straight at me that I realised that that might not necessarily be the case, and that I'd better get the hell out of there. Now, interestingly, you can't go to warp when you've got your guns deployed, so the very first thing that I realised was that I had to withdraw my only means of fighting back in order to get away, and because there were so many ships nearby, charging took a lot longer than it should have done, although it was still fairly rapid. thankfully, I only took shield damage. I didn't take any hull damage whatsoever. So after all was said and done, it was an interesting skirmish, and I noticed that I didn't get in trouble with the law as well. So that was a positive outcome. So I decided to go and have a look at the Metalworks, which is the other station that's available in the system. Now, when I was playing this, and that war broke out back there, I didn't notice that the two people fighting each other were from different factions, and I definitely didn't notice what the factions were. And on top of that, I definitely didn't notice which faction it was that I started shooting at. Turns out, the people I started shooting at were labelled with the acronym EGW. EGW stands for Iranin Goldwing, and the others were DL, Dahan Liberal. Now, I didn't understand at this point what that meant. Obviously, I'm in the Dahan system, so I think that these are local factions, local to the system. Now, the stations in the game can be faction-owned in terms of the Federation, etc., or they can actually be owned by, seemingly, these independent factions, as I'm about to find out. For any of you that are wondering as well, I'm using the Microsoft Xbox 360 controller to control. And while it's not perfect, it's certainly usable. A lot of people are recommending hot-ass joysticks. I can understand and I can see why they would be useful. But I think the Xbox 360 controller is perfectly good enough for the time being for me. I did try using mouse and keyboard to begin with, but I found that incredibly difficult to use and very inaccurate. Although, even with the Xbox 360 controller, I still do have to use the keyboard quite a lot for various different commands. Things like the landing gear, going to hyperspace or warp. The numeric keys, so 1, 2, 3, 4, represent the different panels in the ship. And I sometimes still use the mouse to navigate the menus. Now at this point I am being interdicted again, but this being the second time that it's happened and not really understanding what it was the first time, I decided at some point, do you know what? I'm not going to go for the escape vector, I'm just going to go off on a tangent and see what happens. Sure enough, there is a ship in front of me. I target him, I get my guns out. Stupidly, after seeing that he's deadly and wanted, I decide to fire. Now, immediately my shields are offline and down to 91% hull damage already. Whether or not he was better equipped than me or whether he was just expecting it, who knows. I am a noob at this. So I decide to do the natural thing, which is turn and run. Now the problem is that he is so close that his mass is stopping me from being able to go to warp. So you can see that the charging is taking a phenomenally long amount of time. So the only thing that I can do at this point is just try to evade his fire as best as possible. And you can see the strikes actually hitting my hull in the diagram in the bottom right hand corner. Down to 65% hull. Finally I've actually managed to engage my warp engine, so it's just a case of throttling up to get away. And thankfully that does actually lose him. Now I don't know if you guys have noticed, but on the throttle bar on the right hand side, or the speed bar, there is this sort of section which is blue. Now I don't actually know what it means, but having played the game a bit, what it seems to do is, if you've got your throttle set within that blue area, it seems to be the point at which you're most maneuverable. So, for example, in that gunfight there, you might have noticed that I wasn't at full throttle trying to get away from him. And the reason why is because at full throttle you can barely turn. So I left it in the blue segment in the hopes that I could sort of wriggle my way out of it while my warp drive charged. Yet again, I went flying past my my destination, but in doing so I spotted this unidentified signal source. Now, I don't know what an unidentified signal source is, but I thought, do you know what? Why not? So I went to go and investigate. I have heard that it could have been pirates, which obviously do have bounties on their head, so you can attack them completely without worry. But it turns out that all I get is, in the comms channel, the Mineral Magpie, bulk optical resources sought, good prices offered. Now, I didn't know at the time that that was actually what this was, but it seems as though that was the gist of it. So I spotted the Magpie. He's an expert, he's also clean, so I can't attack him without getting a bounty on my head. So I thought I'd take this basically just as an opportunity to actually go and have a look at some of the models in the game. So I put my weapons away and come up to him to have a look at him, basically. Show off some pretty stuff. And it is quite a pretty game, it has to be said. So I try to match my speed with him, so I'm not going to crash into him, because that would probably incur a bounty. Flying straight in his engines is probably not a good idea either. But you get a sense of the detail for the game and for the model. And that's quite a small ship as well. I mean, it's not perhaps not as small as mine, but it's not huge. So I'll have a bit of another look around just to see if there's anything else before I go, but it doesn't seem like there is, so let's just carry on to the metalworks. Again, I'm actually a little bit too close to the Magpie still, so for the time being it's actually going to stop me from charging my warp drive, but as I get far enough away, you'll see that it speeds up. Naturally, being 0.39 away, I'm probably going to overshoot this almost immediately.
4, 3, 2, 1.
However, I am wise, and the very first thing I do when I go into warp is throttle down, in the hopes that I don't go flying off out of the solar system. Now that is another player, and if I was able to interdict him, then I would be able to drop him out of warp and potentially attack him. But I decided not to, and decided to carry on to the space station. There's a very small loading sort of window between entering things, and I wouldn't say it's particularly detrimental to the game. They sometimes take a little bit of time to load, but it's nothing too critical. Now, I don't know if you can see the faction type, but it does say Iran and Goldwing is the faction type. Now, I didn't notice this at the time, having just shot at some of their space crew. And now my faction doesn't seem to be able to toggle anything either. So, not remembering what I was shooting at, I ask if I can dock there. Not surprisingly, they say no. Do you know what? If you've been shooting at our spacecraft, no, you can't dock at our station, you bastard. Piss off. Now, I didn't actually really understand why, so I tried a few more times, naturally. Some stations don't seem to have very many landing pads as well, especially some of the smaller ones, and I noticed that this one does seem to have a landing pad almost on top of it, so I thought I'd go and have a look, and I did notice that it was opening, so I thought maybe the reason why they weren't allowing me to dock was because someone else was already docked. So I thought I'd wait for them to take off and see if they'll let me dock. Again, I'm just having a few scans of some of the local ships, and there you are. You can see landing pad 1 is now available. No, I'm still not allowed. So at that point I decide, do you know what, it's pretty obvious I'm not going to get anywhere here. Perhaps I should just take it out on this poor unsuspecting soul and follow him. The only downside is I was trying to catch him up by going at absolute top whack speed, and then I realised that he's in the same ship as me, and actually our top speeds are identical. So, and I can't interdict him at warp, so if he goes to warp, he's gone.
Drive charging.
So all in all, I'd say that while the game's still in beta, it's actually incredibly polished, and very slick. It doesn't feel like it's in beta. I would say it's almost releasable. The tutorial could perhaps use a little bit of work, and like I said, there's the odd bug here and there, especially graphical glitches. There's the odd little bit here and there, but nothing that's going to cause too much grief. Compared with Star Citizen, I think this is probably much closer to completion, although their scope, the scope of the project is arguably much smaller. Now, I've only absolutely scratched the surface of what's capable in the game here, so I'm just having a bit of a play around with some of the options. For example, I don't even know if it's possible to view your ship from an external view, which I'm sure it is. Otherwise, the lights are a bit pointless. But overall, it's a very big world. It's very open. And there's a lot of potential there. I decided at this point that I'm going to go back to the station, pick up some resources, and try making a profit on a trade, in the hopes that I will be able to get a bigger ship, and then transport some more goods, or larger amounts of goods, in the future. So I go back to the galaxy map just to give you a bit of an idea as to how big this game is. Now, in the beta, they have limited access to that little tube area. However, that is actually, as far as I'm aware, all playable when the game releases. And to give you an idea of how many systems there are in that tube area currently, there's quite a lot. The area that I'm in is one tiny little segment. However, it is also the starting area. Well, Dahan isn't, but Acellus Primus is. And that is where every player starts. So obviously I would imagine that this is a fairly populated area. And some of the further ones out aren't. And I imagine that there's more opportunities for money making in the further reaches of space, and obviously the security sector of the system that you're in will go down the further away you get from Federation space. One thing I didn't realise when I actually entered this system and took on that bulletin board mission was the fact that this is actually a low security system, which is perhaps why I got interdicted twice and nearly got shot to smithereens. So this is the solar system view, so you can have a look at the planets, find out a bit about each of them, tells you their mass and their type, their contents, the mineral contents. You can also see whether there's asteroid fields in this view as well, and if there are asteroid fields, it'll tell you what type of minerals they're likely to give you if you mine them, which is something that I may well do in another video. You can also do something called fuel scooping, which I've read about, but and I haven't tried myself yet, which basically involves hurtling your spaceship straight at a hot, fiery ball of sun or star, getting as close to it as you possibly can, opening a door in your cargo bay, and scooping up plasma into your cargo hold. Personally, it sounds to me as though the people that are most likely to do that profession are ones with a death wish, but each to their own. Again, while I'm arriving at the station, I noticed there's an unidentified signal source, so I decide that it might be worth going and checking it out. However, on the bottom left-hand side of my screen, you can see that it says High Energy FSD Wake, and underneath that you can see the magic words Need Scan. Unfortunately, I failed to notice this, so I was a bit perplexed as to why I couldn't actually jump out of warp and arrive there, and the reason why is because you need to scan it first, as the game does warn you, and will warn me in a minute. What a high energy FSD wake is, however, I have absolutely no idea. Maybe in a next video I will find out. And again, you can see safe disengage ready. Frame shift cancelled, cloud not scanned. Now, obviously at this point I realise that I'm not going to be able to go there because I have no idea what the hell I'm doing or what the hell it is and how to scan it and what I need to even scan it. So at that point I decide to go back to the space station and get some cargo to attempt to do some hauling. Other players just going about their own business, flying around. Now, the ship that I'm probably most likely going to aim for is probably the hauler style of things rather than the fighter. There are two ships that seem to be the next step up from the Sidewinder, which is the ship I'm in currently. One is a fighter and one is a hauler. The fighter can have much more impressive weapons than the Sidewinder, and as far as I'm aware, it's probably much more manoeuvrable, probably, much more capable. The downside is it's got even less storage space in its cargo hold, so unfortunately, it's completely useless for any type of hauling cargo whatsoever. But it will probably make a very good bounty hunter. The hauler, on the other hand, is huge, has tons more room in the cargo hold than the Sidewinder, much more, and I think is probably the best, has room to be able to equip it as a mining boat, and that's probably the route I'll go down because it's probably the safer option to begin with as a new player to the game. Accidentally get my lasers out at this point and realise that that's not actually a very sensible option when I'm pointing them at a space station. Hopefully these guys will let me dock. And sure enough, they're going to let me dock. So I've got to proceed to landing pad 27, and let's see if we can get somewhere. Now you can see in the bottom right hand corner as I approach the station that the mass locked light is now blue. That means that I cannot go to warp now, even if I wanted to. I am just simply too close to this huge station.
Target shields
So
offline.
27 takes me a little while to spot, but it's over there on the left. Yeah, fly responsibly as I do barrel rolls, deploy my landing gear, and approach. And you'll see that the mini-map changes again, back to the targeting reticule. It's a case of making sure your dots line up.
Landing gear deployed.
And slowly lower it down.
Target shields online. Docking successful. Engines disengaged.
Now I attempted to enter the hangar, but for some reason it wasn't going to let me. So at that point I decided that going into the starport services and having a look for materials was the next best thing. As you can see, my ship was quite damaged and also was quite low on fuel. So I decided to refuel it and repair everything. At which point I pretty much end up with the starting credits I had right at the beginning of the game. Now this being a refinery, an extraction economy, sells hydrogen fuel for what I assume to be at this point fairly cheap values. So I've filled up my cargo hold with 4 tons, or 4 units of hydrogen fuel, in the hopes that I will be able to make a profit on it. Whether I make a profit on it, you're going to have to wait for the next video to find out. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please do remember to subscribe and like it. This is the Headphone Guy, signing off.